I stood on the cracked asphalt of the driveway, my key scratching uselessly inside a deadbolt that had been changed 3 hours before my flight landed. The massive brass house numbers, the ones I personally polished every Monday morning, were gone, replaced by a cheap plastic sign that read, "The Henderson Estate." My hand dropped to my side as the heavy oak front door swung open, revealing a completely unfamiliar security guard holding a clipboard. Is a spouse ever justified in taking secret financial control of shared property if they believe the other partner is hiding assets? Or does breaking that marital trust immediately justify total psychological retaliation without warning? The security guard didn't even look up from his paper as he told me that a man named Julian Vance had finalized the cash sale of the property 48 hours before my flight landed. Julian was my husband, and this suburban Connecticut colonial was not just our home, it was the house my late mother had built from the ground up. "There has been a mistake," I said, my phone already pressing hard against my ear as I dialed my father's private line. My father, a senior partner at Oak Ridge Corporate Law, didn't answer with his usual professional greeting. Instead, the line clicked open to the sound of ice clinking against a crystal glass. "I was wondering when your flight from Chicago would land, Chloe." His voice completely flat, devoid of any parental comfort. I looked through the front window of my house, noticing the custom crystal chandelier in the dining room had already been crated up in cardboard. "Dad, Julian sold the house. He changed the locks. I'm standing outside in my business suit, and the security guard says the title was transferred on Tuesday." My dad let out a low, mocking sound over the receiver, a noise that made the hair on the back of my neck stand straight up. "He didn't just sell it, Chloe. He used the automated wire transfer system from your shared corporate account to fund a 6-month lease on a luxury villa in Malibu for a woman named Bridget Vance. Funny enough, she uses his last name on her social media." My fingers went completely numb around the phone case as I realized my husband of 7 years hadn't just cheated, he had systematically liquidated my life while I was pitching a multi-million-dollar logistics contract to investors in Illinois. "You sound surprised," my dad continued, his tone turning razor sharp. "I told you when you married a guy from the public relations department that he was an opportunist. When you got back, I expected you to cry, but your house paid for their fun, Chloe. He took everything." I looked at the security guard, then down at the gravel beneath my expensive leather heels. My dad expected a breakdown, an emotional collapse that would prove he was right about Julian from day one. Instead, a strange, ice-cold clarity washed over my chest. I smiled and replied into the phone, "Because the house he sold was the replica property on the south lot, Dad." My father went completely silent on the other end of the line, the sound of his breathing suddenly heavy and uneven. He knew exactly what that meant. But before he could speak, I caught sight of a black moving van pulling into the cul-de-sac, its side panel bearing the logo of a high-end art liquidation firm. Julian hadn't just sold the real estate, he promised the buyer the entire private collection of ancestral paintings. The silence from my father lasted so long I thought the call had dropped. "What do you mean, the replica property?" my dad finally asked, his arrogant tone completely vanishing. I walked away from the front porch, stepping onto the manicured lawn of the estate, looking toward the heavy tree line that separated the two identical tracts of land my family owned in this wealthy suburb. 3 years ago, when municipal tax codes shifted, my grandfather had divided the estate into two perfect parallel plots, the north lot and the south lot. To save on corporate asset taxes, we built an exact physical mirror of our main house on the south lot to use as a high-end corporate rental and staging area for international clients. Julian had lived with me in the North Lot mansion for years, but he never handled the family accounting or the deed registry. He merely signed whatever corporate documents I put on his desk during tax season. When he went searching through my private study to steal a property deed for his quick cash sale, he grabbed the folder marked 1142 Heritage Way, Mansion B. He thought it was a legal designation for our primary residence. I whispered into the phone, walking toward my parked rental car. We sold the corporate shell house, I whispered into the phone, walking toward my parked rental car. The one owned entirely by our family's logistics firm, not the personal deed with my name on it. My father's voice tightened immediately. Chloe, that is even worse. If he sold a property belonging to the logistics firm using forged corporate resolutions, he didn't just steal from you. He committed federal bank fraud against a board of directors that includes 3 former federal prosecutors. I know, I said calmly, getting into the driver's seat and turning the key in the ignition. And right now, he is on a first-class flight to California with Bridget, thinking he just cleared $4 million from a private cash buyer. The complexity of Julian's deception was staggering. For the past 14 months, he had been maintaining a completely parallel life, using an account he opened under a dummy corporation called JV Luxury Holdings. He convinced a private real estate investment trust from New York that he was the sole managing director of the property, providing them with altered corporate minutes that gave him the power to sell the South Lot mansion without my signature. But Julian's arrogance was his downfall. He didn't check the fine print of the corporate bylaws I updated last December. Any unauthorized sale of company real estate automatically triggered a clause that froze all linked executive accounts, including his personal checking, his corporate credit cards, and the specific escrow account holding the $4 million payout. I sat in the idling car, watching the art liquidation truck back into the driveway of the South Lot house. The men in jumpsuits began unloading empty wooden crates. They were there to collect the ancestral paintings Julian had listed in the bill of sale to sweeten the deal for the New York buyers. The problem was, the paintings inside the replica house were high-quality digital prints used for corporate staging. The real masterpieces, worth hundreds of thousands each, were locked safely inside my actual home on the North Lot, protected by a biometric security system Julian couldn't access. My dad finally spoke up, his corporate lawyer brain fully kicking into gear. Chloe, if the buyers realize they've bought a house with fake art and a clouded corporate title, their legal team will file an emergency injunction within 24 hours. They will come after our family firm. Not if we report the fraud before they discover it, I replied, pulling out of the driveway. I am driving to the state police headquarters right now with the original deed and the real corporate registry. Julian thinks he's spending tonight in a Malibu villa, but really, he's setting himself up for a corporate embezzlement charge. But what about the $4 million? If the escrow is frozen, where is the money right now? I looked at the dashboard clock. It was exactly 4 p.m. in New York, which meant the wire transfer clearinghouse had just closed for business day. The money isn't in the escrow account anymore, Dad. Before Julian boarded his flight, he initiated a transfer to his dummy corporation, but because the South Lot is flagged as a corporate asset, the funds were automatically routed into our company's emergency reserve vault. He didn't steal my money. He just legally deposited $4 million of investor cash into my private corporate control account. I drove down the interstate, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows through the trees. My phone buzzed against the center console. It was a text notification from our bank's automated alert system. Attempted withdrawal of $50,000 at Malibu Luxury Rentals, LLC. Declined due to insufficient funds. Julian had landed. I could picture him standing in the grand marble lobby of the Malibu villa, his custom linen suit slightly wrinkled from the coast-to-coast flight, presenting his black corporate card to a sleek receptionist while Bridget stood beside him, surrounded by designer luggage. He would be smiling, telling the staff there must be a temporary glitch with his New York private banking node. Instead of calling him, I opened my laptop in the parking lot of the police station and logged into the corporate portal. With 3 clicks, I terminated Julian's employment with Vance Logistics for gross financial misconduct. This action automatically canceled his corporate health insurance, his company vehicle lease, and his access to the digital travel concierge service he used to book their return flights. My hands were steady on the keyboard, my heart rate completely normal. The state police detective who met me in the lobby was a man named Miller, someone who handled white-collar crime in our district for 2 decades. I laid out the folders, the true deed to the North Lot, the corporate charter for the South Lot replica house, and the forged signature pages Julian had submitted to the New York Investment Trust. Detective Miller put on his reading glasses, flipping through the forged resolutions with a slow shake of his head. Your husband used a notary stamp belonging to an employee who retired from your firm 3 years ago, Mrs. Vance. This isn't just a bad divorce move. This is a manufactured financial crime. The moment he signs the final occupancy waiver for those buyers from California, it triggers a grand jury indictment. He already signed it, I told the detective, pointing to the digital signature timestamp from Tuesday afternoon. He wanted the money cleared before I returned from my business trip, so he could vanish without facing me. The detective looked at me, his eyes studying my expression for any sign of hesitation. If we move forward with this, the state will issue an emergency asset freeze on everything connected to his name. He will be stranded in Malibu with 0 financial resources. That is exactly what I expect, I replied. As I left the police station, my phone finally rang. The caller ID showed Julian's personal number. I let it ring until the very last second before sliding the screen to answer. Chloe! His voice came through the speaker, tight, panicked, and completely stripped of his usual charm. There is something wrong with the corporate accounts. The bank says my cards are restricted under a compliance audit. I am at the rental office in Malibu, and they are threatening to call security if I don't settle the deposit right now. Why would you need corporate accounts in Malibu, Julian? I asked, keeping my voice perfectly level as I pulled back onto the highway. I thought you were in Hartford managing the quarterly logistics audit. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end, followed by the muffled sound of a woman's voice asking him if the card was working yet. Julian walked away from her, his voice dropping to a frantic whisper. Chloe, listen to me very carefully. I made an investment move. A big one. I sold the Heritage Way property to a group out of Manhattan. The money is supposed to be in my holding account, but the entire balance is showing as 0. Where is the $4 million? Hey everyone! The manipulation in this family is reaching a breaking point, and Julian has no idea he just walked straight into a legal buzzsaw. If you are waiting to see how he reacts when he finds out he sold a fake house and handed his wife $4 million, hit that like button and subscribe right now so you don't miss the final showdown. I pulled over into a scenic overlook overlooking the valley, the lights of the wealthy Connecticut suburbs beginning to twinkle below. The $4 million is exactly where it belongs, Julian, I said into the phone, my voice dropping any pretense of ignorance. In the corporate asset recovery vault of Vance Logistics. Thank you for the capital injection, by the way. Our shipping division really needed the liquid reserves for the upcoming fiscal year. The line went dead silent. The sound of the California ocean breeze was audible through his receiver, contrasting sharply with the cold reality setting in. You knew? He stammered. The deed? I had the original deed from the safe. You had the deed to the South Lot replica house, Julian, I said, leaning back against the leather seat. The house we use for corporate staging, the one with the digital print artwork and the lease agreement tied directly to our board of directors. You didn't sell our home. You sold a piece of corporate real estate using a forged signature stamp from a dead corporate secretary. Chloe, please? Julian's voice cracked, the panic finally breaking through his polished exterior. The New York Trust, they have a legal team that will destroy me if they find out the title is clouded. They already sent a moving crew to collect the paintings. If those crates are empty, they will file for immediate grand larceny. Oh, the crates aren't empty, I replied smoothly. I had the logistics team fill them with 200 copies of our updated corporate compliance manual and your official termination notice. They should be opening them right about now. A loud exclamation from Bridget sounded in the background of his call, followed by the distinct sound of a luxury hotel manager politely but firmly telling them they needed to vacate the premises immediately. Julian was hundreds of miles away from home with a woman who only cared about his bank balance, holding a declined credit card and an impending arrest warrant. Julian, please, Julian pleaded, his breath ragged over the line. Bridget's name isn't on any of the corporate paperwork. I did this alone to protect her. You can't let them arrest me out here. If you tell the New York Trust it was an administrative tracking error, we can split the funds. I will sign a post-nuptial agreement giving you full control of everything else. I listened to him bargain, his voice stripping away the last remnants of the confident man I once trusted. You still don't get it, Julian, I said, watching the headlights of a highway patrol car pass my parked SUV. Bridget isn't as shielded as you think. To clear the background checks for the luxury lease in Malibu, you uploaded her personal identification directly into the JV Luxury Holdings corporate portal, the one completely monitored by our compliance server. The background noise on Julian's end shifted instantly from defensive murmurs to panicked whispers as he realized his mistress was fully entangled in the corporate paper trail. What did you do, Chloe? She didn't sign anything. She accepted a wire transfer of $10,000 on Tuesday morning from an account labeled as company expense funds. Under federal law, accepting corporate capital derived from unauthorized asset liquidation makes her a named beneficiary in a fraud scheme. She isn't your accomplice, Julian. She is your co-defendant. Long pause. The sound of arguing broke out sharply on his end of the phone, a muffled door slamming shut as the reality of their situation dissolved their relationship in real time. She just grabbed her purse, Julian whispered, his voice sounding hollowed out and incredibly small. She's leaving through the side lobby. She took the car keys. The car lease was terminated 45 minutes ago. The vehicle tracking system has already locked the ignition down at the resort gate. Neither of you is going anywhere. You ruined me, he hissed, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage and fear. You planned this. You chose to steal from a logistics firm with a dedicated legal compliance department, Julian. I simply allowed your transaction to clear according to state banking laws. If you had looked at our shared account for even 5 minutes instead of browsing Malibu real estate listings, you would have seen that my father's firm handles our escrow protection. I waited for him to say something else, but there was nothing left for him to argue. The state police have already transmitted the fraud package to the district attorney in Los Angeles. They know exactly which luxury resort you're standing in. I suggest you stay right there so the local deputies don't have to track you down across state lines. I hung up the phone before he could reply. 2 hours later, my father called me back, the sound of his ice glass replaced by the crisp shuffling of legal briefs. The Manhattan Investment Trust just contacted our office, my dad said, his voice containing a newfound level of respect. They're terrified of being dragged into a corporate fraud scandal. They've agreed to dissolve the sale of the South Lot immediately, in exchange for a full refund from our corporate reserve account, minus a 15% breach of contract fee. Which means our firm gets $600,000 of their deposit for our trouble, I noted, pulling back into my driveway of my true, untouched home on the North Lot. Exactly, my dad said, letting out a short, genuine chuckle. Your husband's little getaway just paid for our firm's entire Q2 legal dividend. I walked up the steps of my house, my key turning perfectly in the original brass lock. The house was quiet, beautiful, and completely mine. Julian had tried to use my own life to fund his betrayal, but in the end, he was nothing more than an unauthorized transaction that had been permanently declined.